Good morning, grade 5. Today we are going to be talking about that little tiny baby dot. Now, you've probably learned what this dot does, but we're going to go over it again because the song The Dot Always Counts in number 111 is your assignment for today, and I want to make sure we understand how it works. Now, as you are looking at the dot, you're probably wondering what its actual name is. Well, its actual name is called an augmentation dot. And all that means is that's just a fancy word for extending. Okay, so it's just going to make the note an extended amount of time. So we're going to talk about how that matters in both of these notes. All right, well, let's get started. The first thing to understand about the augmentation dot is how it applies to half notes. Now, this is something you already know, but I just want to go over it so that it helps you understand how a dotted quarter note works. Okay, the dot adds half of the value of the note that it's attached to. So we know that a half note is only 2 beats. We know that half of 2 is 1. So what that ends up being is that we're going to add the value of 2 beats in a half note to the value of 1 beat in a quarter note. And that is going to be the same length as a dotted half note. So in more simple terms, we have our half note over here tied to our quarter note over here. And we know that the tie adds those values together. So we have 2 beats plus 1 beat, meaning that our dotted quarter note is going to be equal to 3 beats in length. So we know that the tied half and quarter equal a dotted half, which is 3 beats. So the important thing to remember is that the dot adds half of the value. So now that we understand how a dotted half is 3 beats in length, let's take a look at what a dotted quarter looks like. Okay, we got our dotted quarter. Now remember what I said about the dot. The dot means that it adds half of the original value. So a quarter note is 1 beat, which means that we're going to add half of that to it. So 1 plus half of 1, which is a half, equals 1.5. Here's what that looks like with writing. That's pretty easy math, okay? 1 plus a half equals 1.5. The duration is going to be for this note. So let's go ahead and look at that in a musical context and see maybe what that looks like with ties as well. I have written out 2 things that are equal to each other. We have a dotted quarter plus an eighth note, and then we have a quarter note tied to an eighth note with an additional eighth note at the end. I'm going to go ahead and say both of these rhythms out loud. Ta, ta. Here's the next one. Ta, ta. Identical, just written differently. Composers will use the dotted quarter note in place of the dot in the eighth note in order to save space in the staff. So let's go ahead now and write out underneath those the numbers that we write for our rhythms, which is something that we did at the end of last year and we've done only a little bit of this year. There they are. As you can see, the ones and the ands over here are laid out a little differently than the ones and the ands over here. However, they're still counted the exact same. 1 and 1 and. Counted exactly the same. Okay, so in a musical context, you'll find dotted quarter notes frequently. But I will give you a tip. Most of the time, a dotted quarter note is going to be followed by an eighth note. So the rhythm will always be counted 1 and 1 and 1 and. That helps make that counting in particular a little bit more simple. All right, last thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at this in our actual song, number 111, The Dot Always Counts. And here we have it, my version of the score. Of course, this is what I see. You guys have your own line of music, which makes it easier to read. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to zoom in on the flute line. All of these lines of music are exactly the same, except you can see at the bottom, percussion, yours is counted a little bit differently. But because as you can see in the winds, they have half notes in the end of line, or in the end of measure 1. It's really hard to do a half note on a snare drum, so they go ahead and give you some extra little fun stuff to play. But overall, it's going to be the exact same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and let's take a look at the flute line. We'll zoom in on it. Okay, you can see we have written out the rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. They've written out the subdivision, which is what we do with 1s and pluses and 2s and pluses and all that. But we know that this is counted 1, 2, and 3. Go ahead and do that on your own. Ready? Go. Great job. Let's look at measure 2. Ah, there's our tie. So we know that that tie is the same thing as that dotted quarter note. So I'll count it first, and then you give it a go. Ready? Me first, then you. 1 and 3. Your turn. Try it. Ready? Go. Good. I hope you held that half note the correct amount of time. And then look at our last 2 measures. The only thing that's different between these 2 measures is that they're on a different space or different line. So the notes are different, but the rhythms are the same. Let's do these 2 lines, these 2 measures together. Ready? Go. 1 and 3. 1 and 3. Great job. Now, I will be recording a version of 111 on the trumpet. I will also be doing a version of it on the snare drum for my percussionists. So be sure to, after you watch this video, go ahead and listen to that, and that'll help you hear those dotted quarter and eighth note rhythms a little bit more clearly. Good luck, and thank you again for your submissions, and I will see you guys next time.